Okay, let's talk about the actual CISSP exam. Now, the actual CISSP exam is known as a computerized adaptive test, and you will get about 100 to 150 questions on this particular exam. You'll have 3 hours to complete it, and you need 700 out of 1,000 to pass. In other words, you need about 70%. Now, I want to spend some time talking about what exactly is a CAT test. This is a test that, as some people say, it wants you to fail. No, it wants you to pass as soon as possible. The exam engine is there to make you pass with the least amount of question, not the maximum amount of questions. The exam will give every single student that sits there exactly 100 questions. Everybody gets that. That's the minimum amount you'll get. The maximum you can get is up to 150 questions. Now, how does it work? Well, there's a couple other points to know. First of all, the questions are completely random. They're not by domains. You're not going to get security and risk management, then asset security. It doesn't work like that. The questions are completely random. Here's the thing. The questions are weighed and they're worth different values. So that's something else to consider, because not every question carries the same weight. Some are worth more points than others. It's multiple choice. You'll have 4 choices per questions, but then you'll also have a lot of questions where these 4 choices are choose the best answer. Now, I'm going to make an assumption that over 80% of your exam questions, and I know this is going to sound scary, is going to be choosing the best, the most, the least, what comes next, or first type answers. I'll explain what those are when I take a look at exam questions later in this particular class. The other thing to keep in mind is that there are going to be a few drag and drop questions on there. Not a lot of drag and drops, but you're going to get a couple drag and drop questions, and I'll explain what those are in another video in this particular class also. So let's go back to talking about this CAT exam. So here's how a CAT test works. It starts out by giving you 100 questions. Now, let's say you get to question 100 and you have achieved a 70%. The exam ends. Now, let's say you get to question 100 and you're up 68%. The exam might give you another 10 questions or another 5 questions. If you answer enough of those correct and you hit the 70%, it ends. Now, let's say you get to question 110, give you 10 more, you're up to 69%. It may give you another 5 or another 10. So you get those 5 or you get those 10 correct, or whatever it is that needed to get you to that 70%, the exam ends again. So it keeps doing this over and over and over. It keeps giving you questions and giving you questions until you have reached that 70, until it reaches its maximum capacity of up to 150 questions. And then it's like, okay, you're up to question 150, you're at 69%. Oh, well, you don't pass. Here's what I tell students that pass. Most of my students will pass with exactly 100 questions. Anybody that does that, I always reply to them, congratulations, you're very smart. Now, if you pass at question 150, I'm going to also tell you congratulations, but that's a skin of a teeth pass. But hey, a pass is a pass. Now, God forbid you don't pass. Now, I've never really heard of anybody that didn't pass at question 100. Although if you've ever taken this test and you failed this test at question 100, that is a very bad failure, because that means the exam got up to question 100. It was like, okay, if I give this person 50 questions more, and they don't answer, let's say they answer all of those correct, they're probably still going to fail. That's how much you got wrong in the first 100. So you don't want that. Let's say you get to question 150, God forbid you don't pass. Well, I know that's terrible, but it's a good failure, because what happens is you're borderline pass or failing. So just go back. Actually, I should say you're borderline passing. Let's go back, do some regrouping. Let's do a little bit more studying, and I'm pretty sure you'll pass it the next time. So that's how these particular exam works. The other thing I want to point out that drives people crazy on this test is you cannot go back. I know that's terrible, but that's just the way this thing works. So what happens is people watch the clock. They're watching the clock because the clock is ticking down, and you're looking at a question and you're like, oh boy, if I click next, I'm not going to come back. Well, I don't want you to worry about this, because very rarely have I ever heard of students running out of time. Now, I've taught this class to hundreds of students, and very rarely do I ever hear of a student saying they ran out of time. Now, I've heard of students that have gone 2.5 hours, close to the 3 hour mark, but most of my students are 1.5 hours to 2 hours and they're done. So I don't think the timer is an issue. I'll give you some exam tips coming up a little bit later when we take a look at exam questions. So again, I know you can't go back, but again, it's not that bad.